Dr. Doug Mater, he is so full of ideas of the things that people need to know. So we've talked about all kinds of reptiles and all kinds of things about living with reptiles, Dr. Doug. But now it turns out there's another wrinkle in the fabric, which is that reptiles can get mites. Mites like, I don't know who else gets a mite other than a reptile. You know about all the animals in the world, but especially exotics. Is mites something that many creatures get?
Oh, sure. Mites can be, there's thousands of species of mites in dogs, cats, people, birds,
Really?
reptiles. Yeah, it's amazing.
Ooh. So do reptiles get a certain kind that are a problem that needs management?
They do. There's over 250 different species of mites that affect reptiles.
Oh dear.
But for the average hobbyist, there's really only three that we really need to be concerned about.
Okay.
The first one is called, oddly enough, the snake mite. How original is that?
But it's easy
And
to remember.
it's easy to remember, and it actually affects not only snakes, but it affects lizards too. Now, I have never, it doesn't mean it can't happen, but in my 40 plus years experience, I've never seen mites on turtles. They get ticks, but they don't get mites.
Turtles
Um,
get ticks? Oh
oh
my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
We'll have to
No,
do
no,
a show on,
another show.
oh my
You know,
Lord.
they might get them in the wild, but if they do, they're really not problematic. But I'm mostly concerned about our pet reptiles that we
Right,
have now.
right.
So snake mites and lizard mites. The snake mite is called Ophiuchus notricis, and it looks kind of like a teardrop with 8 legs.
Oof.
Now, the lizard mite is different. Now, I've never seen lizard mites on snakes. Again, it doesn't mean it can't happen, but I've never seen that. But I've seen many lizards with snake mites. Lizard mites are called Hirstiella trombidiiformes, big fancy term,
Ooh,
but
that's a big,
they're almost like a bright orange red, and they look like a shield. And they also have 8 legs. And both the snake mite and the lizard mite they suck blood. So that's why they're so problematic, because
oh,
if you get one or two, it's not a big deal. It's a little itchy. But if you get a lot of them, which sometimes I've seen animals come in with hundreds and hundreds of mites, they suck so much blood, they make the animal anemic, and it can kill them. It'll actually kill the snake, kill the lizard. Now, there's a third type of mite called a chigger mite, which I think you're up in New England. You've probably had them before. People get them all the time. Dogs get them. And that's the immature mite that lives on plants, and it jumps on a reptile like a snake or a lizard. But the thing is, they don't eat blood. They just use the snake or lizard as a transport host until they go through their sheds or their molts, and then they jump back on and they eat the lizards. They eat the plants. So they're not as big of an issue other than just being uncomfortable, because they do itch. They do cause skin disease, but they don't suck the blood. And the other thing is, you don't really need to treat them, because once they mature, they fall off the lizard. And the way you can tell the difference between a snake mite or a lizard mite and a chigger mite is that the snake mite and the lizard mite have 8 legs, and the chigger mites have only 6 legs because they're still growing. And you think, how can you see it? You can actually see it. They're big enough to see with the naked eye.
really? The
Yeah.
naked eye. I was going to say, do you have to run around with your magnifying glass?
No,
Right
they're
now,
pretty big.
you have your gorgeous Whippet Whitney in the background for those of you watching on YouTube, and your beautiful kitty cat. Now you have tortoises, turtles, a frog, a major frog who isn't a frog, he's something else, but he's really cool, and snakes. Do those mites that could be hanging out on your amphibians, reptiles, whatever, couldn't they go to your dog and cat?
Generally not, because mites are generally fairly species specific,
Ah,
and the dogs and the cats are too warm. Snakes are much cooler animals, and so when the mite gets on the dog and the cat, it's too hot for them and it jumps off. But I'm glad you asked that, because interestingly enough, there is actually one published case in a medical journal of a person that had hundreds, he was like a hoarder, and he had hundreds and hundreds of snakes in his house. His
oh my,
house was pathetically just a mess. And he had so many mites in his house that they got into his bed, and they actually got on his skin. And it's the first reported case of a human getting snake mites. And they know that because he had lesions all over his skin, and they biopsied the lesions and they found the snake mites. If you're a reptile owner, potentially you could get it, but that's a pretty extreme example. In general, if you have a snake covered with mites, wear gloves when you handle it and you clean it. They're not going to bother you. Or if they do jump on you, you're too warm, they jump right off.
Yeah, but we don't really want to have a snake with any mites. So
No,
assuming
no, you
you
don't.
were there with your
And
snake and maybe they're orange color, or maybe the lizard ones are, but I guess at some point you have to wear gloves, but don't you have to quickly call your vet?
yeah, I think it's a good idea. The thing is, if you see mites, if you just see a few mites, you can usually treat it at home pretty easily. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
If you have an animal that's got covered with mites and he's so debilitated, definitely need to go see a vet because they're so weakened from anemia, which means they've lost so much blood to them that they need to treat the anemia. And the mites are secondary. You got to treat the
I
anemia
see.
first. And the other thing that's really important, Tracie, and this is interesting, is that the mites can be vectors of disease, which means that let's say a mite bites a snake that has aromaniasis, which is a very common bacterial disease in snakes, and then jumps off that snake and bites another snake, it can actually transmit that disease to the second snake. And there have been a few other diseases, and even in one of the nasty reptile viruses, that's highly suspicious that the mites are a vector for those diseases.
So we have those of us that have dogs or cats, which you also do, of course, we think of ticks as being vectors of horrible diseases, but it turns out these mites not only suck the blood, but I should say, I know that back when I lived in Italy and the neighboring farm had a sheepdog and a little flock of sheep, and the dog died covered in ticks. He was sucked that dry of blood.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess that can happen with any of these blood-sucking creatures.
Yeah, it sure can. Now, you'll notice over my shoulder, there's a small terrarium with a very
Yeah,
tiny snake in it. And so the question is, where do the snakes get the mites?
good question.
Well, I've had that snake for almost 17 years and he's never had mites and he probably never will get mites. Most of the time, a person either buys the snake with mites from a dirty pet store, and that's, I'm not being disrespectful, but pet stores have a lot of animals coming and going and coming and
Right.
going, and all it takes is for one employee to
Yes.
break quarantine protocol and handle a snake that is a new arrival, and then handle one of the snakes that's wild and transmit the mite on their clothes, on their sleeves, on their hands. So you go to the pet store or you go to a breeder and you buy a snake that has mites, you take it home and it gets into your colony. Man, they are hard to get rid of
Really?
because they don't breed on the snake. They live on the snake, they eat on the snake, they grow on the snake, but when they breed, the female jumps off the snake or jumps off the lizard, lays its eggs, and it can be anywhere up to 100 eggs in the environment. And then after a certain period of time, depending on temperature and humidity and the species of mite, the mite will hatch out. It will go through its instars, the chigger stages, and then it turns into an adult mite and starts sucking blood. So it's very important that you quarantine any new animal into your house, especially
Okay.
if you already have animals, keeping it like in a completely different room. Yeah, I strongly recommend all new animals be checked by a vet for evidence of disease, mites, other parasites, internal parasites. Make sure that they're healthy before you introduce them to the other snakes. Once you get it in there, you not only have to treat the snake or the lizard, but you also have to treat the environment. Now, there are many different ways to treat them. Excuse me. There are some very good topical sprays you can use. And one of the ones I can comfortably recommend because I've used it and it's been very successful and it's been out there for over 25 years is a product called Provent-a-mite,
Oh, perfect name.
Provent-a-mite, right. And it's got a permethrin base to it. Now, there's permethrins and there's pyrethrins. Pyrethrins can
Oh,
be very dangerous to snakes.
yes.
And unfortunately, over the years, I have seen many people take pyrethrin sprays like you use in your garden,
Yes.
and they spray it on the mite, and the snakes will die because it
Oh,
absorbs through their skin. Even though they have scales, the pyrethrins will absorb through the skin and kill them. If you catch it in time, right away, and get it to the veterinarian, and usually what you start to see is they go into seizures.
oh my
And you get them
God.
on the antidote, you can save them, but it's best just not to use it. So Prevent-a-mite it has a chemical in it called permethrin. It's been tested, proven for over 2 decades. It works extremely well. You can spray it right on the mite. And what I recommend doing is spray it right on the reptile. What I recommend doing is you spray it on the reptile, As soon as you spray it on, you take a clean rag and you immediately wipe it all off because
Right.
it's instant kill. As soon as the Prevent-a-mite hits the mites are dead. Then you wipe it off and then you give the snake or the reptile a bath to get the rest of the chemical off it and wipe off all of the dead mites. Now, when you do that, and this is really important, you take the snake out, you put it in a clean cage, okay? And then
Yeah.
you have to basically break down the entire cage that it was living in because if you don't, remember, the
The
mites
egg.
lay their eggs in the
Yeah.
cage, and then 7, 10 days later, those eggs hatch out, and boom, the cycle starts all over again.
So
So,
are we
what do
saying
you
like empty it and bleach? I always think bleach.
not bleach. I
Not,
mean, you can use bleach, but you can use the Prevent-a-mite in the cage as
oh,
well. If you have wooden furniture like logs and things like that, or porous rocks, I recommend taking the log and the rock and then baking it, putting it on a cookie
oh
sheet,
my
put it
goodness.
in the oven at about 150 degrees for an hour. That's not enough to make it catch on fire, but it's enough to kill any mites that are
Wow.
in there, or it'll desiccate any eggs that are in there. Then you can put that back to your snake cage. If you don't want to go through that hassle, just throw away the piece of wood and get a fresh,
Thank
clean
you.
one,
Thank you.
you
I was
know?
going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not worth it because that's so many times over the years I've seen it where people have brought in a snake, we've treated the mites successfully, and then they take it home and then they call and they're mad at me 2 weeks later because he's got mites again. I did my job, but you didn't do
Yeah.
your job. So that's very important. There are other treatments. There's a medication called ivermectin, which works extremely well. And there's different ways you can give it. You can give it by injection, you can give it by oral. You can actually put it directly, a calculated dose directly on their skin, and then it absorbs through the skin. Now, there's one thing I want to bring this up that I've seen many times, and that is people put ivermectin, they get it from like a feed store because
Yes.
they use it in cattle,
Correct.
but it's really concentrated. And then they put it in a spray bottle and they spray it on their reptiles. So remember, ivermectin absorbs across the skin. And like any drug, it's designed to kill things. It's designed to kill parasites. So if you're on a reptile and you put too much on them across your skin, you can kill them. I saw a guy lose 100 snakes because he thought he could save money going to the
Oh
veterinarian,
my
went to
goodness.
the farm store, bought some ivermectin spray, sprayed all of his cages. Every single snake went into toxicity and died.
Oof.
So now there's one other thing that I want to recommend not using. I don't see it as much now as I used to, but still people do it. Do you know those strips that you can hang in your room?
Yes.
Like the
I didn't even think they sold those anymore.
Yeah,
People
I
used
hope
to
they
hang it
don't.
in their closet for moths, even.
And people were putting those in their snake cages too, and those can actually kill reptiles. So I don't recommend those. So the Prevent-a-mite works really well. Ivermectin from a veterinarian works really well. There are some natural products if you go online. Just be careful and really read the reviews. There are some natural products, some like eucalyptus oils and things that you can use. I don't have a ton of experience with those, so I'm not necessarily recommending them. But there's one other last thing I can recommend that's a real safe one, and that is basically just olive oil or corn oil. You put it on a
No
rag
kidding.
and then you rub it all over the reptile, just completely cover them tip to tail. And then the oils from the corn oil or the olive oil gets in the breathing pores of the mites and suffocates the mites.
Oh, I
So it's
love that.
extremely safe.
Oh, I love that.
Um, Right. And then when you're done, leave it on there, put them in a fresh, clean cage, rub the snake down with olive oil. They look nice and shiny. It'll kill the mites, clean the cage, and then wipe the snake off really good before you put him back in there. Now, I want to just share a story with you because you know how people are. I wrote about that in an article years ago, and some guy decided that he would take a bowl, filled it with olive oil, and then he put his lizard in there and he soaked the lizard in the olive oil, and the lizard drowned because it couldn't get out. And once again, he was mad at me because I gave him the recommendation of the olive oil, but I didn't tell him to put the
A
lizard in the olive
bath.
oil. I told him to wipe it down.
That is just beyond dumb.
My point is follow the instructions and you should do you
And
should be
use your
okay.
head. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Doug, this has been amazing, really great. So many things that people have to think about with their snakes, but I love the mite information. It's great. And try to avoid mites in the first place. And don't be stingy about going to your vet. There's so many things that your exotic vet can help you with. And they don't all know as much as Dr. Doug Mader, but they're doing their best for you. So reach out to them. Thank you, Doug.
All right, Tracie. Thank you so much.